and a lot of the education programs that are fundamental.
Mr. Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me just say, you all are my favorite team to come before the Rules Committee so far this year, and I look forward to. It's true. It could just be that we've developed a better relationship.
Every Monday we're here.
I tell folks.
I feel like Dancing with the Stars, don't you?
I get the lead though.
I don't see Cynthia.
And I talk to folks back home about that relationship that the two of you have. I tell the story, Mr. Dix, the first time I saw you before the Rules Committee, when folks on the committee were complaining that they weren't able to get their amendments made in order, and you said, "Come to me, and I will help you make this in order, because if it's important to you, it's important to me, and we ought to have a chance to talk about this on the House floor. We shouldn't just talk about it for the C-SPAN cameras. We should talk about it on the House floor, and we should do something about it if it's worth talking about it." And that made a big impression on me at the time. Folks,
I wasn't chairman last year. I was down the list.
Absolutely, and I, as a fellow who wasn't here at all last year, I'm troubled by some of the back and the forth about that, because we do need to take responsibility and talk about need to take responsibility. I'm proud of the responsibility we've taken. There hasn't been a single easy decision that your committee's been asked to make this year. Not one. Not one. And nobody sat around, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Chairman Rogers, I hadn't heard anybody sit around and say, we're on the Appropriations Committee and we're just not going to do it because it's not our fault we got into this mess. I wasn't chairman last year, and we're just going to sit on the sidelines and pass it on. But folks got down to work on day one, and when folks came back and said we needed more, you got down to work again and again and again, and here we are. I don't know. I'm glad you're in talks with somebody on the Senate side, Chairman Rogers, and I don't know if you know, Mr. Dix, of how it is we can spur that process along. How do you have a negotiation with a body that hadn't passed a bill yet?
I think you've got to keep asking your leadership to engage. We have to ask the House leadership to engage, the Senate leadership to engage, and the White House to engage. I mean, they've got to sit down in a room and work this out. This has gone far enough.
And is that fair, Chairman Rogers? I mean, we've got a president who actually presented a budget. He presented his FY11 budget as he was required by law, and 12. He presented both budgets. He's done too. The Senate, we passed H.R. 1 to get us through the end of 2011. Then the Senate has done nothing?
Zero.
Nothing last year, nothing this year. How do you work with that?
Yeah, what if the House had said, we're not going to pass a bill, you guys need to talk to us? No, they say pass a bill, then we'll talk. And we say, okay, we've passed a bill. You pass a bill, we'll have something to go to conference with to work out differences, and that's the way we do business. But the Senate is just refusing to act. And frankly, the White House has not been engaged fully in this process either. And we're determined, on our side of the aisle, we're determined not to have a shutdown.
Good.
We want this government to continue. It needs to continue. So we're trying our best to get a fair and reasonable funding for the balance of this year so we won't have to shut down the government. I wish the other side would have the same sentiments.
Mr. Dix, do you have any expectation that the Democratic leadership on the Senate side will end up passing a bill of any kind, or do you expect to have to go into negotiations with just ideas?
My view of this is that at some point, the Speaker, the President, and the Majority Leader are going to have to get in the room and come up with a number, and then Mr. Rogers, and I hope on a bipartisan basis, can backfill the numbers and try to put the bill that will do the least damage to the country, and we'll have a vote. It's got to be a compromise. It's not going to be all or one. It has to be somewhere between where the House is and where the Senate is. Now, remember, we did, and even though the press just throws this out the door, we did cut $40 billion in the CR for the first CR that went to March 4th from the president's budget request. $40 billion. So, we think we should get a little credit for that. And then we've added this $4 billion, and then the $6, and we're over 51. That's halfway there.
And those $40 billion.
And I think some compromise is going to have to be in order.
Those $40 billion go into the baseline now. That $40 billion from December is now in the CBO baseline going forward.
Well,
is that right?
We're $40 billion below the president's budget request for 2011 in what was put in the CR.
But what happens with that $40 billion, with the $3 billion from or the $2 billion from $4 billion from 3 weeks ago, the $6 billion here? When we get together to start talking about 2012, when you all start talking about 2012, will those dollars, will those spending reductions be in a new baseline, or are they assumed to continue in perpetuity, or are they assumed to
Whatever.
Just for the period of the CR.
just for the period of the CR? Is that
Well, whatever we finally come up with as the funding level for 2011 in a CR that goes for the balance of the year, that becomes the baseline.
so?
And remember, all these cuts have to be imposed in the last 6.5 months. Now it's going to be the last 6 months of this year. That's going to be painful.
But if we
some of these programs.
if we zero out the congressional office of Rob Woodall, does that zero? Is it assumed to continue into 2012, 2013, 2014, or is it assumed to be reborn on October 1st? Well, but if I were an agency provision, is it reborn on October 1st, 2012, or does it get assumed as a zero in the CBO baseline? Do you know the answer?
It's a zero as long as it's zero until somebody appropriates money for it.
So when
That's my view.
So when we're talking about a $6 billion CR spending reduction today, is there a 10-year dollar value on that $6 billion, that it's saving us in interest costs down the road, and it's saving us in programs that are assumed to be zeroed out down the
Just
road?
the 3 weeks.
Just the 3 weeks. Okay. Thinking about reality and not fantasy. You know, the reality is there are folks who were sent up here to do some of these tough decisions, and it pains me to hear people talk about jobs, and particularly talk about community, because I couldn't agree with you more, Mr. Hastings. I believe that we have robbed the communities in our districts with the nanny state. With a state that says, don't you worry about your neighbor, we're going to take care of them from Washington, D.C. And it steals dignity from those who need to be taken care of, and it steals dignity from those of us who should be doing the caretaking.
Mr. Woodall, would you yield to me?
Mr. Chairman.
Let me try to correct or properly put an answer to your question earlier about the baseline. The CR is a temporary, whatever we come up with is a temporary number. For fiscal 12, whenever the Congress passes a budget resolution and passes that big spending number, macro number, to the Appropriations Committee, we will then divide up that number amongst the 12 subcommittees, and that becomes the base figure for next year.
And for purposes of beginning that budget process, then is the budget line starting from the 2011 request? Is it starting from the CR passed in December? Is it starting from the final CR that we pass here? What delineates the starting point for that budget resolution?
It will be the budget committees.
Yeah.
The
President's budget is a recommendation to the Congress, and then the budget resolution, if it's passed, when it's passed, that lays out the parameters.
And that becomes binding on us.
Yeah.
Like I said, there has not been a single easy decision that's come across your desk. I don't actually expect 2012 to contain any easy decisions either, but I do want you to know how much I have come to appreciate the way that you all have worked together and helped me to understand this process better. So I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr.